In Sao Paulo, nestled in a lavish building on Avenida Faria Lima, resided Marcus Whitmore, a man whose life appeared to be plucked from a contemporary fairy tale. At 38, he was the epitome of envy, the person everyone aspired to be. Having inherited a vast fortune from his English lineage, Marcus managed a sprawling business empire in Brazil. Yet, his true passion lay not in work, but in living life to the fullest. His days were a whirlwind of gourmet meals at Michelin-starred restaurants, exclusive soirees, and globe-trotting adventures. He lived for the moment, never concerning himself with the future. Marcus was the kind of man who laughed heartily, reveled in the clink of champagne glasses, and claimed he needed no one to find happiness. Or so he told everyone. But as with any compelling tale, beneath the flawless exterior lay secrets unseen. That December morning, the sun bathed Sao Paulo in its golden glow. Marcus lounged on his expansive balcony, soaking in the panoramic view. He idly flipped through a travel magazine as one of his assistants brought him breakfast. "Mr. Whitmore, your Aspen itinerary is confirmed. Departure on Christmas Eve, as usual. Would you like to review the accommodation details?" Marcus nodded absently, adjusting his designer sunglasses. Aspen was his annual retreat, a snowy sanctuary where he and his best friend David escaped the chaos and sentimentality of Christmas, a holiday Marcus openly scorned. To him, Christmas was a facade, a time when people feigned happiness and generosity. He much preferred the glitz of parties with flowing drinks and pulsating music over the forced cheer of gift exchanges and hollow pleasantries. David, his inseparable companion, was the only one who could coax Marcus into maintaining any semblance of tradition. For over a decade, they had celebrated together at the same luxurious resort. David was more than a friend. He was like a brother. They shared countless memories of travels, adventures, and, most importantly, their mutual avoidance of emotional entanglements. But this year, something felt off. When David called to confirm their plans, his tone was uncharacteristically hesitant. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about Aspen," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Talk about what? You know it's our tradition. You're not backing out, are you?" Marcus chuckled, though a flicker of unease crept into his voice. David paused, the silence stretching uncomfortably before he finally spoke. "I've met someone, Marcus. I think I'm going to spend Christmas with her." The words hit Marcus like a thunderclap. "Someone? David, you're joking, right? It's our Christmas, our tradition." "I know, man, but I'm in love. I can't miss this moment with her." In love. The word felt like a slap. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Come on, David. Love? That's for the naive. You know that better than anyone." But David didn't laugh. His voice grew firm. "Maybe so, Marcus, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I should be." When the call ended, Marcus sat frozen, staring at the horizon, phone still clutched in his hand. Disbelief and irritation swirled within him. How could David abandon him for something as fleeting as love? To Marcus, relationships were distractions, yet a deeper unease began to gnaw at him. He was accustomed to solitude, but never from David. It was as if the world around him was cracking, and he didn't know how to repair it. In the days that followed, Marcus scrambled to rearrange his plans. He reached out to other friends, hoping to find a companion for Aspen, but they were all tied up with their own families and festivities. Each rejection deepened the void within him. For the first time, Marcus began to realize how much he relied on his annual tradition with David to mask his own loneliness. On Christmas Eve, Marcus's mansion was eerily quiet. He had dismissed most of the staff, claiming he wanted privacy. Only Rosa, his longtime maid, remained, staying until he decided to have dinner. The gourmet meal he had ordered sat untouched on the table. He wandered through the grand halls, past a dazzling Christmas tree adorned with ornaments that held no meaning for him. The silence was oppressive, Marcus opened a bottle of wine, but as he gazed at the empty glass before him, an unfamiliar emotion stirred within. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was something deeper, more unsettling. He turned on the television, but every Christmas commercial seemed to taunt him. Happiness in the family. Love is the greatest gift. He switched it off with a sharp gesture and sank into the sofa. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus felt the weight of his life. Despite having everything, he sensed something was missing. But what? Just before midnight, Rosa appeared, announcing she had to leave. Her family was waiting for her. She had worked for Marcus for years, and like a silent guardian, she knew every detail of his life, even the ones he tried to hide. "Are you spending Christmas alone?" she asked, her voice laced with concern and affection. "By choice, Rosa. I prefer it that way," Marcus replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "No one prefers to spend Christmas alone," Rosa said, her gaze piercing through his facade. For a moment, Marcus considered dismissing her, but her words lingered in his mind as she left. Alone, that's exactly how he felt. As Rosa reached the door, she hesitated, then turned back. "Why don't you spend Christmas with us at home? It's nothing grand, but it's from the heart." Marcus laughed nervously, ready to decline, but something in her expression gave him pause. "Think about it," she added. "It's not good for anyone to be alone tonight." With that, Rosa left, leaving Marcus in a sea of silence and doubt. Unbeknownst to her, and even to Marcus, a door had opened, a door he feared stepping through, but one that might hold the key to saving him from himself. The clock ticked on, emptiness loomed, and fate waited in silence for Marcus's decision. His mansion, once a symbol of opulence, now felt like a hollow stage. The lavish furnishings, the roaring fireplace, the untouched gourmet meal, they all seemed to mock him. His gaze drifted to the balcony window, where the city lights twinkled, revealing homes filled with laughter and warmth. In that moment, something shifted. He thought of Rosa. She had been with him for over a decade, a constant presence since he moved to Brazil to expand the family business. Though her role was that of a maid, she was far more a silent pillar of support. Marcus rarely spoke of his family. Growing up in London, he had learned early on that appearances mattered more than emotional bonds. His mother, a socialite obsessed with her image, spent more time in beauty salons than with her children. His father, a cold and calculating tycoon, viewed Marcus and his siblings as mere extensions of his legacy. There were moments in his childhood when Marcus had tried to win their attention. Once, he spent weeks rehearsing for a school play, only to sit alone in the audience as other parents cheered for their children. His parents never showed up. The sting of rejection shaped him, teaching him to expect nothing from anyone and to rely solely on himself. When he inherited his fortune after his parents' untimely death, he severed ties with his remaining family and started anew in Brazil. Now, as he stood in the silence of his mansion, Marcus felt the weight of those years of isolation. The cracks in his perfect world were widening, and for the first time, he wondered if he could or should step through the door Rosa had opened. The clock continued to tick, and the emptiness pressed in, waiting for his next move. In Brazil, Marcus found freedom, but also a loneliness he constantly tried to bury beneath parties and travels. Rosa was the first person who treated him with something resembling genuine care. When he first arrived in Sao Paulo, lost in a new country and wary of everyone, it was Rosa who turned his house into a home, though he'd never admit it. She asked simple yet meaningful questions. "Have you eaten today, Mr. Marcus? Did you sleep well? Do you need anything?" He always responded curtly, but her tone carried a warmth that comforted him. She didn't ask out of duty. She truly seemed to care. That night, Rosa's words echoed in his mind. "Why don't you spend Christmas with us? It's nothing fancy, but it's from the heart." Marcus shook his head, trying to dismiss the idea, but the emptiness was overwhelming. He glanced at the dining table, set with fine china and gleaming silverware under the chandelier's light. It all felt lifeless. Taking a deep breath, he tried to think logically. What did he have to lose? Spending Christmas alone in that vast, silent mansion would only dredge up memories he'd rather forget. At least with Rosa and her family, he'd be surrounded by voices, laughter, and maybe even a little human warmth. He picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, then dialed. Rosa answered, surprised. "Mr. Marcus, has something happened?" "Wait! Where are you?" "Don't go yet. I'm coming with you." The words spilled out before he could second-guess himself. "Wait for me at the square by the bus stop." "On the other end," Rosa paused, then replied with a mix of surprise and joy. "Of course, Mr. Marcus. I'll be waiting." After hanging up, Marcus stood with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He walked to the dining table where the untouched gourmet meal sat and packed it into containers. He grabbed a box of imported chocolates he'd bought for a client and selected a few bottles of wine. Passing through the living room, he noticed wrapped gifts meant for business associates. Now, they had a new purpose. He put on his coat, gathered the bags, and stepped outside. The cool night air hit him like a shock, but it also invigorated him. He drove to the bus stop, where Rosa stood holding a small bag, dressed simply but impeccably. "I can't believe you actually came," she said, smiling as she got into the car. "Yeah, me neither," Marcus replied, trying to sound casual. "But here I am. So, shall we go?" As they drove through the nearly empty streets, Rosa talked about her family. "My daughter, Clara, organizes everything. She's very dedicated. Decorates the house, cooks, plans the games." Marcus listened, but his mind wandered. He wasn't used to being included in something so ordinary. It felt as though this small gesture had pulled him out of the bubble he'd built around himself. The drive took about 20 minutes. When they arrived, Marcus paused to take in Rosa's modest yet charming home. Christmas lights twinkled in the windows, and the aroma of home-cooked food wafted through the slightly open door. "Welcome, Mr. Marcus," Rosa said, her smile a mix of gratitude and pride. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The moment Marcus crossed the threshold, he felt a warmth that wasn't just from the room, but from the energy of the house. Laughter spilled from the living room. Voices chattered excitedly about supper, and soft Christmas music played in the background. Then, amidst the cheerful chaos, he saw Clara. She turned to see who had arrived, and her eyes met his. There was something in her smile that unsettled him. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. Marcus hesitated as he walked through the cozy living room. It was a world apart from his cold, empty mansion. Here, the air was alive with warmth and vibrancy. Handmade paper ornaments, twinkling colored lights, and a table set with comforting dishes filled the space. But it wasn't the decorations that caught his attention. It was Clara. She moved around the room, laughing as she arranged presents by a small Christmas tree. When she turned and saw him, her face lit up with a serene, unpretentious beauty. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun, and her eyes sparkled with the joy of the evening. "Ah, you must be the famous Mr. Marcus," she said, her smile disarming any resistance he might have had. For a moment, Marcus was speechless. It wasn't just her appearance that struck him, but the genuine happiness she seemed to feel at his presence, even though he was a stranger. "Yes, and you must be Clara," he replied, trying to sound more at ease than he felt. Clara extended her hand. "Welcome. I hope you don't mind the mess. Here, we do Christmas our way." Marcus shook her hand, feeling the warmth and simplicity of the gesture. "Messy sounds perfect." While Rosa went to the kitchen to help with dinner, Marcus stayed in the living room with Clara and her younger siblings, who were running around, laughing, and playing with paper props. Clara watched them with affection and a sense of responsibility. "You have an incredible family," Marcus said, breaking the silence. Clara laughed softly. "Thank you. They're intense, but I wouldn't trade them for anything." And you organize all this? Almost everything. My mother does her best, but I like to get involved. I think Christmas is more special when you put effort into creating unforgettable moments, even if they're simple. Her words lingered in Marcus's mind, so different from the superficial world he'd built for himself. The celebration began shortly after. Sitting around the table, Marcus was introduced to the family. The joyful chaos was comforting. Children chattered loudly. Rosa maintained order with loving authority, and Clara orchestrated everything with a patient smile. When it was time for games, Clara brought out an old deck of cards and proposed a game of questions and answers. It's a tradition here, she explained. Everyone answers something personal. No lies, okay? With each round, Marcus found himself laughing more and opening up. When it was his turn, one of the children asked, "Do you have a big family?" He hesitated, his smile fading for a moment. He felt Clara's gaze on him, but instead of discomfort, there was curiosity and understanding. "No, not anymore," he answered honestly. "My family was complicated." Clara sensed there was more behind his words, but didn't press. Instead, she deftly shifted the conversation. "Well, now you have at least one night with our family. And I warn you, we can be very noisy, but we promise not to bite," she said, drawing laughter from everyone. After the games came the gift exchange. The wrapping wasn't fancy, but the emotions were genuine. Marcus watched with a mix of surprise and admiration. When it was his turn, he handed the children the chocolates he'd brought, and their eyes lit up with delight. Clara received a small gift, a bookmark with a motivational phrase, "Always believe in your dreams." "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," Clara said, smiling as she opened it. "Looks like someone told my mom how much I like to read." "I only brought it without even knowing you," Marcus admitted. "It was just a coincidence. I could have chosen something better, but since it wasn't, I hope you like it." "I'm giving it to you with a lot of affection," Marcus said, trying to mask how moved he was by the way Clara accepted something so simple with such genuine gratitude. Clara smiled, then picked up a guitar from the corner of the room and began to play a soft melody. The music filled the space with a tranquility that seemed impossible amidst the lively atmosphere. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off her. It wasn't just her skill with the guitar. It was the way she poured her heart into every note and word she sang. As the hours passed, the children gradually fell asleep, and even Rosa decided to rest, leaving Marcus and Clara alone in the living room. They sat on the sofa, the soft glow of the Christmas tree casting a warm light around them. "You look surprised," Clara said after a long silence. "At what?" Marcus asked. "At all this," she replied, gesturing around, "as if you didn't expect something so simple could be good." Marcus chuckled, though it was tinged with melancholy. "I think you're right. I'm not used to this. My life has always been more about excesses." "But excesses don't fill you up, do they?" Clara asked, her tone gentle but probing. He stared at her, caught off guard by the depth of her question. "No," he admitted after a pause. "They don't." Clara smiled but didn't press further. It was as if she understood he needed the silence to process his thoughts. "What about you?" Marcus asked, shifting the focus. "Don't you miss something more? Trips, parties, all those things I thought were indispensable." "I have everything I need," Clara replied with disarming simplicity. "My family, my dreams, my faith that good things happen to those who seek them." Marcus fell silent again. For the first time in years, he felt a peace that didn't come from possessions or achievements, but from a genuine connection with someone. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something he couldn't yet name. The house was quiet now, the clock chiming almost 5 in the morning. Marcus and Clara remained on the sofa, the Christmas tree's soft light flickering and casting delicate shadows around the room. Outside, the city was beginning to settle into sleep, but inside, something profound was stirring. Clara sat barefoot, holding a mug of hot tea she'd made moments earlier. Marcus, beside her, held a glass of water, though he barely noticed it. His gaze was fixed on her as she spoke, each word revealing a piece of her soul. "Have you always been so detached?" Clara asked, her tone teasing but her eyes serious. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "I wouldn't call it detachment, maybe protection. When you get used to losing important things, it feels easier not to cling." Clara tilted her head, studying him. "Lose how?" He hesitated but found himself wanting to be honest. "My parents were never affectionate. They didn't have time for it. When they died, I realized there wasn't much to mourn. It was like losing a habit, not a real connection." "That must have been hard," Clara said, her empathy making Marcus look away. He wasn't used to such understanding, especially from someone he barely knew. "And you?" he asked, shifting the focus. "Have you always been this optimistic?" Clara laughed softly. "Not always, but I've learned to be. Growing up with little teaches you to value what really matters. My mother was always a warrior, you know. She went out of her way to make sure my siblings and I never felt less than special, even when we barely had enough for dinner. I think I inherited that from her." Marcus smiled, a real smile, not the arrogant one he usually wore. It was full of admiration. "You're special. That's obvious." Clara looked away for a moment, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but filled with something neither of them could yet name. Hours passed without them realizing it. They talked about everything. Clara's dreams of becoming a teacher, Marcus's travels around the world, the difficult moments and small triumphs that had shaped their lives. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains, Clara yawned, covering her mouth with her hand. "God, it's so late. Or early." Marcus smiled. "I don't think you'll ever sleep if it's up to me." He moved closer to her. Clara stood, straightening her blouse. "I really need to rest. Today, we still have to organize everything for lunch. My mother won't forgive me if I'm sleepy." Marcus stood too, feeling an unexpected reluctance to let her go. "Clara," he began, hesitating. "Yes, I know this is a bit impulsive, but I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow. Just the two of us. After all this is over, I'd like to talk to you more." Clara looked at him with surprise, but also something like gratitude. "I'll think about it. Let's see how the day goes." "I'll take that as a yes," Marcus said, trying to sound confident, though there was genuine anxiety in his voice. She smiled before disappearing down the hallway, leaving Marcus alone in the living room. He sat back down, watching the Christmas tree lights fade as the sun rose. Something had shifted inside him, something he couldn't ignore. Eventually, he got up and left, feeling the need to sleep. In the late afternoon, after the Christmas celebrations at Rose's house had ended, Clara accepted Marcus's invitation. He took her to a small restaurant on the outskirts of the neighborhood. It wasn't as luxurious as the places he usually frequented, but it was cozy, with a calm atmosphere that felt perfect for their conversation. "It's strange being here with you," Clara admitted, looking at him from across the table. "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because you don't seem like someone who'd feel comfortable in a place like this. Simple, ordinary." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a hint of defiance in his tone. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." "Maybe not," Clara replied, her smile disarming him once again. Over dinner, the conversation flowed as easily as it had the night before. Clara talked about her plans to finish college and her dream of teaching children from underprivileged communities. Marcus listened with an attentiveness he didn't know he was capable of. "And you?" Clara asked after a while. "What's your dream, Marcus?" He laughed, though it was tinged with melancholy. "I don't know if I have a dream. I think I've spent so much time chasing things I thought I wanted that I've never stopped to think about what really matters." "Maybe it's time to find out," Clara said simply. After dinner, Marcus drove her home but lingered outside for a few minutes, lost in thought. The conversation with Clara had moved him in a way no one else ever had. He realized his life had been a constant search for validation, for something to fill the void he'd felt since childhood. But no amount of money, travel, or luxury had ever done that. Clara, with her kindness and simplicity, was showing him there might be another way. He didn't know what came next, but he knew he didn't want to lose what he was beginning to feel. That night, Marcus returned to his mansion, but the emptiness he usually felt was gone. Something had changed. He stood in front of the Christmas tree still set up in his living room, its lights flickering softly. He thought of Clara, her smile, the way she spoke about life, the dreams she shared without fear. For the first time in years, Marcus felt it might be possible to find something real, something that wasn't fleeting. But was he ready for it? Did he even know how? The answers didn't come, but he knew the search had just begun. The days after that Christmas Eve felt like a rebirth for Marcus. He began visiting Rosa's house more often, always bringing something. Chocolates for the children, flowers for Rosa, or sometimes just as presents. He was allowing himself to be part of a world entirely different from the one he knew, a world where simplicity and affection mattered more than any wealth he possessed. But it wasn't just Rosa's house that drew him in. Clara, with her serene kindness and simple, honest outlook on life, had become the center of Marcus's thoughts. He tried not to let it show too much, but his desire to see and hear her led him to find excuses to drop by Rosa's house more often. One day, Rosa, who had been watching everything with a keen eye, finally decided to address what was happening. "Mr. Marcus," she said as she set the table for dinner, "you've been spending a lot of time at my house lately. Has anything changed?" He looked at her with a half-smile. "Maybe I've discovered that I like it better there than here in my own house." Rosa paused, her eyes fixed on him, trying to decipher what lay behind his words. Like a protective mother, she felt a twinge of worry. "And Clara," she asked hesitantly, "I hope you know she's a girl with a very pure heart. I just hope you'll be careful." Marcus understood what Rosa meant. He knew his reputation wasn't the best. After all, he had always been known as a man of parties and superficial relationships. But for the first time, he felt the need to prove he was capable of being different. "Rosa," he said with a sincerity that surprised even himself, "I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can promise you one thing. I would never hurt your daughter." As the weeks passed, Marcus's visits to Rosa's house became part of the routine. He began to take part in everyday activities, washing dishes, playing cards with the children, and even accompanying Rosa to the market, carrying bags as if it were second nature. These small gestures didn't go unnoticed by Clara, who saw a side of him that few people knew. One evening, as they sat in the backyard, Clara looked at him with a shy smile. "You don't seem like the same man I met that Christmas Eve," she said, almost teasingly. Marcus raised an eyebrow, curious. "Is that good or bad?" "Interesting," Clara replied with a grin. He leaned forward slightly, a challenging smile on his lips. "I need to improve my reputation with you then." Clara laughed, but her smile soon turned serious. "What made you change, Marcus?" He hesitated before answering, but he knew he couldn't avoid the truth. "You, Clara. You and your family. You showed me something I never knew I wanted, a real home." Clara remained silent, but her heart raced. She knew she was beginning to fall for him, but she also knew Marcus still carried parts of his past that could hurt her. Rosa, watching the growing closeness between Marcus and Clara from afar, couldn't ignore her unease. One evening, while Clara was putting away the dishes after dinner, Rosa decided to broach the subject. "Clara, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mom." "What is it?" "You and Mr. Marcus. You've been spending a lot of time together. Is it something serious?" Clara paused, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't know, Mom. He's different from what I expected. He makes me feel things I've never felt before, but you're afraid," Rosa added. Clara nodded. He's so different from me, and sometimes I think that could be a problem. Rosa placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her expression filled with concern. I just want you to be happy, my child, but I don't want your heart to be hurt. Men like him have a way of complicating things. Clara didn't reply, but her mother's words echoed in her mind for days. A few days later, Marcus showed up at Rosa's house earlier than usual, bringing Clara a bouquet of flowers. New Year's Eve was only a few days away, and Marcus was loving this new routine. Clara welcomed him with a surprised smile, though she couldn't hide the shyness she felt when they were alone. They went for a walk around the neighborhood, talking about life, dreams, and the little things that made them smile. When they reached a quiet square, Marcus stopped and looked at Clara. Clara, I need to tell you something. Say it. Since I met you, my life has changed completely. You make me want to be someone better, someone worthy of you. Clara felt tears forming in her eyes, but she couldn't speak. Marcus stepped closer. His eyes locked on hers, and before she could hesitate, he kissed her. It was a soft kiss, but full of emotion. When they pulled away, Clara looked at him, feeling that something irrevocable had happened between them. They stayed there for hours, lost in each other's company. Rosa began to notice that Marcus was truly changing. He had stopped attending the parties he once loved, avoided his old social circles, and instead devoted his time to Clara and her family. In less than a week, he had already transformed so much. He even started getting involved in social work, something he had never done before, donating toys to children living on the streets. One day, Rosa watched him helping one of the children with their homework and felt a mixture of relief and hope. Maybe he would be able to make her daughter happy after all. You look different, Mr. Marcus, she said as he got up to get a glass of water. How different? More human, he replied with a smile, though he didn't elaborate. Despite their growing closeness, the differences in their worlds began to show. One day, while they were together in the living room, Marcus received a call from his friend David, inviting him to a party. He declined immediately, but Clara noticed a hesitation in his voice. Do you miss your old life? She asked. Marcus didn't answer. He changed the subject and left shortly after. The next morning began quietly at Marcus's house. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the empty weight of his luxurious routine. Clara had transformed his life in ways he had never imagined. There was love, simplicity, and purpose in his days. He was sitting in his living room, reading a book Clara had recommended, when the phone rang. It was 2 days before New Year's Eve. The number on the screen was familiar, David, his longtime friend. Marcus hesitated before answering. It had been days since their last meaningful conversation, and the memory of the canceled trip to Aspen still lingered in his mind. David. Marcus answered with a friendly tone. Marcus, my friend, I need to tell you something. David's voice was full of frustration. It's over. It's all over with Mariana. It didn't work out. She was amazing, but it wasn't meant to be, you know. Christmas Eve with her was nice, but nothing compares to Aspen. Marcus was silent for a moment, processing his friend's confession. I'm sorry, David. Relationships are complicated. Complicated? David laughed bitterly. Let it go. Listen, I was thinking, how about we resume our plans? Aspen, not Christmas, but New Year's Eve, just like old times. Just the two of us, no drama, no love affairs, just fun, lots of women, and partying every day. It'll be just like before, Marcus. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to find the right words. I'm not going, David. This year is going to be different for me. On the other end of the line, David laughed, but there was disbelief in his voice. You're joking, aren't you? That's it, isn't it? You're trying to get even because I canceled Christmas. Dude, stop playing games. It doesn't suit you. It's not revenge, Marcus replied firmly. It's just, my life has changed, David. Since Christmas Eve, when I was alone, a lot has changed. I'm not the same man anymore. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, David answered with skepticism. How has it changed? What do you mean, Marcus? It's complicated. If you want, we can talk about it another day. But Aspen, it's not going to happen for me this year, and not any time soon, I hope. David mumbled something inaudible before hanging up, leaving Marcus with the feeling that this story wasn't over yet. The next day, Marcus was in the kitchen of the mansion, helping Rosa make a list to prepare lunch. He felt comfortable there, something he would have found impossible months ago. He was talking to Rosa about Clara's future, encouraging her to resume her studies, when the insistent sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. "It must be a package," Rosa said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll get it," Marcus said, heading for the door. When he opened it, he found David standing there, his expression a mix of curiosity and irritation. Dressed in his usual sharp suit, David's posture radiated impatience. "David," Marcus began, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to come in person because you seem to be talking nonsense on the phone," David replied, stepping inside uninvited. "We need to talk." Marcus sighed, closing the door behind him. "David, I told you I'm not interested in that kind of life anymore." "I'm not here to talk about trips," David interrupted, his tone sharp. "I want to know what's going on with you. You're not the Marcus I know. What's changed?" Before Marcus could respond, David began scrutinizing him with a critical eye. He noticed something was different. Marcus didn't look like the man he once knew. "Wait a minute," David said with an incredulous laugh. "Is it true what I heard the other day? That you're involved with your maid's daughter? What did she do in a week to turn you into this?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. David shook his head, stunned. "You've got to be out of your mind, Marcus. Do you have any idea what you're doing? These women, they know how to play the game. Of course, she's using you. This is a scam, and you're falling for it." In the kitchen, Rosa overheard every word. She had gone back to grab something from the cupboard near the living room and accidentally caught the conversation. David's words cut through her like knives. "Those women," he had said. She sat down at the kitchen table, holding her head in her hands. Rosa knew Marcus was a man of the world, but she had never imagined his involvement with Clara could provoke such judgment. She feared that, deep down, David's words carried a weight Marcus might not be able to ignore. Tears welled in her eyes as she thought about the possibility of her daughter getting hurt. "Clara doesn't deserve this," she muttered. In the living room, Marcus clenched his fists, trying to contain the anger rising within him. He looked at David, who was staring at him with a mix of concern and contempt. "Enough, David," Marcus said coldly. "I'm not going to let you talk like that about Clara or Rosa. You don't know anything about them." "I know enough to understand what's going on," David shot back. "You're blind. They're manipulating you, Marcus. It's obvious." "I think it's time you left," Marcus said firmly. David opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus's gaze was unwavering. With a frustrated sigh, David grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "You're making a mistake, Marcus, and when you realize it, it'll be too late." Marcus didn't respond. He waited until the door closed behind David before letting out a long sigh. He knew David's words might have planted doubts, but there was no room for them in his heart. Marcus walked into the kitchen and found Rosa still sitting there, her eyes red. He approached her slowly and took a seat beside her. "You heard, didn't you?" he asked softly. Rosa nodded, unable to look him in the eye. "Rosa," Marcus began, taking her hands in his, "I would never hurt Clara. Never. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." "But, Mr. Marcus," Rosa whispered, finally looking up, "what if he's right? You come from such a different world, and people will talk. I just want to protect her." "I understand," Marcus replied sincerely, "but you have to trust me. I'm not playing with her heart. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With Clara. With you." Rosa looked at him for a long moment, searching for the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded, though worry still lingered on her face. As Rosa returned to her work, Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, staring out the window. He knew the love he felt for Clara was real, but he also knew he would face many barriers to prove it, to Rosa, to Clara, and perhaps even to himself. The question that tormented him now was, did Clara believe in him enough to face the world alongside him? That evening, Marcus's house felt quieter than usual. Rosa had left earlier, and Clara, sensing her mother's unease, sent a brief but worried message. Asterisk, is everything okay? My mother seemed distant when she got home. Asterisk. Marcus looked at his phone, a heaviness in his chest. He knew the conversation with David had left its mark, both on Rosa and himself. Clara was everything he wanted, but the world seemed determined to test every aspect of their relationship. Asterisk, yes, it's all right. We'll talk tomorrow. Asterisk, he replied, lacking the courage to bring up what had happened. Clara deserved to know, but he wanted to find the right moment to explain everything. The next day, Marcus arrived at Rosa's house early. He needed to clear the air, not just with Rosa, but also with Clara. He didn't want any doubts planted by David to fester. When he arrived, Rosa greeted him with a shy smile, but Marcus noticed an emotional distance that hadn't been there before. He left the car on the street and went inside, carrying a bag of bread and sweets he bought on the way. Clara's in there, Rosa said, gesturing toward the living room. Clara was sitting on the sofa, reading a book. When she saw him, she closed the book and stood up with a warm smile. You're early, she said, hugging him. I needed to see you, Marcus replied, holding her longer than usual. Clara noticed a serious tone in his voice and pulled him down to sit on the sofa. What happened? Marcus took a deep breath before speaking. Yesterday, David came to my house. He didn't say nice things, Clara. In fact, he insinuated that you and your mother had bad intentions toward me, that it was all a scam. Clara stared at him, surprised and offended. She stood up, pacing the room. What about you? What do you think about it? I think he's wrong, Marcus replied firmly. I trust you, Clara, more than I've ever trusted anyone. But I needed to tell you because I know those words might come back to you somehow. Clara sat back down next to him, her eyes filling with tears. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not his words. It's the fact that, because of your world, I'll always need to prove that I'm good enough to be with you, that what I feel for you is real. Marcus held her hands, looking her straight in the eye. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Clara. Not to David, not to the world, and definitely not to me. I see you. I know who you are. A tear rolled down Clara's cheek, but she managed a small smile. It's hard, Marcus, but I want to face it alongside you. While Marcus and Clara talked in the living room, Rosa was in the kitchen, listening to everything. Clara's words cut her deeply. She knew her daughter was telling the truth, but she also knew how cruel the world could be. Rosa remembered the struggles she had faced throughout her life, the doors that had been closed to her because she was a woman, because she was poor, because she was a single mother. She knew how people judged without knowing the truth. Seeing Marcus enter the kitchen soon after, Rosa tried to hide her worried expression, but he noticed immediately. Rosa, he began gently, I need you to know that I will never hurt Clara. Ever. Rosa sighed, finally voicing the fear she had been holding back. Mr. Marcus, it's not just you. It's what you represent. I'm afraid that Clara's love for you will put her in a position she can't bear. The world is cruel to those from below. It always has been. Marcus felt the weight of her words. I understand, Rosa, but since I met Clara, my life has taken on a meaning it never had before. She's made me realize that I don't just want to be what the world expects of me. I want to be someone better, someone worthy of her. Rosa stared at him, evaluating his words. I believe in you, but change needs to come from within. If it's real, Clara will feel it. Marcus nodded, knowing Rosa was right. The next day, New Year's Eve, Marcus devoted himself even more to Clara and her family. They celebrated the arrival of the new year together, promising that nothing would shake their love. Marcus began finding ways to help Rosa discreetly, offering support without making her feel like she was being bought. But as their bond grew, so did the rumors. David, feeling betrayed by Marcus's choices, spread the story among their mutual friends, and soon it reached social media. David couldn't understand how Marcus had given up Aspen to spend New Year's Eve in a modest home with his housekeeper and her family. He felt compelled to wake Marcus up from what he saw as a delusion. A gossip website broke the news. Marcus Whitmore, the country's most eligible bachelor, is involved with a simple maid. The comments were cruel, and public humiliation seemed inevitable. When Clara saw the news, she was devastated. Rosa, though silent, wore an expression that spoke volumes. Marcus knew he had to act quickly to protect them, but he also knew this could be the greatest test of love he would ever face. That night, Marcus stood in front of the mirror, staring at a man torn between the world he had built and the love that had transformed him. He knew more challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He was willing to fight for Clara. But would their love be strong enough to withstand the pressures of the world? Or would the shadows of Marcus's past and society's prejudices destroy what they were building together? The news spreading across the internet hit Clara like a storm. For the first time, she felt the real weight of being by Marcus's side. Sitting on the sofa at home, phone in hand, she read the comments that seemed to echo her deepest fears. Asterisk, she just wants his money. This maid has been planning this all her life. Asterisk. Clara, you need to stop reading these things, Rosa said, holding her daughter's hand. These people know nothing about you, nothing about us. Mom, what if they're right? I don't belong in this world. I just wanted to love him, but it seems like that will never be enough, Clara replied, struggling to hold back tears. Rosa took a deep breath, squeezing her daughter's hand tighter. My child, what matters is how you both feel. If your love is true, you'll get through all this. Though Rosa tried to remain strong, Clara felt her heart breaking. Loving Marcus was the best thing that had ever happened to her, but the price seemed too high. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Clara's face, marked by sadness, haunted his thoughts. He knew her exposure was the fault of the world he lived in, but he also knew he had to act to protect her. Sitting in his office, he made a decision. He turned on the camera and started recording. Good evening. I'm Marcus Whitmore, and this is a video I never imagined I'd make. Over the last few days, a lot has been said about me and Clara, the woman I love, and I'm here to tell our story. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I met Clara on Christmas Eve. I was lost, alone in my empty mansion when her mother, Rosa, my maid for years, invited me to spend the night with their family. It was the best decision I ever made. In that simple house, I found something I had never experienced before: true love, human warmth, and the joy of being surrounded by people who care about each other. He looked straight into the camera, his gaze serious and sincere. Clara isn't with me out of interest. She's with me because she loves me, and I love her. She showed me what really matters in life, and I won't let lies or prejudice tarnish what we have. Marcus ended the video with a slight but firm smile. I know the world can be cruel, but if you've ever really loved someone, I urge you to share this message. Love is the most valuable thing we have, and I will never give it up. The video was posted on Marcus's social media early that morning. He didn't expect much, perhaps a few messages of support from his closest friends. But as dawn broke, he realized something bigger was happening. The video had gone viral. Millions of views in just a few hours. People from all over Brazil were sharing the story, often with emotional messages. Asterisk, their love is too beautiful. Everyone deserves love like this. Prejudice has no place here. Be happy. Asterisk. Clara, who woke up to a flurry of notifications, was in shock. When she saw the video, tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. Rosa, watching it, was also moved. For the first time, she saw Marcus as someone willing to fight for her daughter, no matter the cost. With the support of thousands of people, Clara's life began to change. The suspicious looks gave way to smiles and words of encouragement. Marcus, for his part, began making significant changes. He sold the mansion he had always considered a gilded prison and bought a cozier apartment full of life. He also began investing his time in social projects, many of them led by Clara. Together, they created a program to offer free education to young people from underprivileged communities, fulfilling Clara's dream of transforming lives through teaching. Rosa, initially hesitant, began to realize that Marcus was a different man. He was no longer the superficial millionaire she had met years ago. He had become someone more human, more present, more generous. She continued to work in the apartment, looking after him like a mother. She preferred it that way. A few months passed, and their love grew stronger every day. Marcus organized a small celebration in their new apartment. Rosa, Clara, and the whole family were present. After dinner, Marcus asked for the floor. "A few months ago, I was lost," he began, looking directly at Clara. "I thought I had everything, but the truth was that I had nothing until I met you. Clara, you showed me what love is, what family is, and what happiness is." He knelt down, taking a small box out of his pocket. Clara put her hands to her face, completely surprised. "Clara, will you spend the rest of your life with me?" Tears flowed uncontrollably as Clara said yes in a choked voice. The room erupted in applause and laughter, and Rosa in the corner let out a sob of emotion. Over the next few months, Marcus and Clara married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. They had built a life based on respect, love, and generosity. As they danced under the stars on their wedding night, Clara whispered, "I never imagined my life could be like this. You gave me everything." Marcus held her closer, his eyes shining. "No, Clara, it was you who gave me everything, and now we have it all together." Their love had withstood prejudices, judgments, and challenges, and together they proved that true love always wins. Did you like this moving story? What rating would you give it? Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories full of drama, love, and overcoming. Click on the one that appears on the screen. Oh, and a Merry Christmas full of love, peace, and joy to you and all your family. See you in the next video.